everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Christine, for the warm welcome. Very delighted to be here today. It was great to hear from the US Ambassador on some of the issues that we are battling with right now worldwide. And it's great to hear what's happening in Mongolia. I'm right now dialing in from India, but I have a wide experience of running fintech advisory business in Southeast Asia. And today, while we talk about the investment scenario and how it really works in the startup space, and especially for women, I wanted to start the session by talking about two personal experiences. I've done some field work in Bangladesh, and more often than not, I realize that a lot of women are far more empowered than men. And when we talk about women facing gender, digital, or financial divide, women being much smarter, they tend to downplay the achievements just to make their husband or the father or the brother just for them to be happy, to make them feel that they are the real heroes of the house and they're the ones who call the shots. So I realize that most often we downplay, and this is the reason that only 2% of the VC funding goes to women. And when women go out pitching their business ideas, they usually ask much lesser for funding compared to the male counterparts. And since I mentioned I'm in India right now, we have around 140 unicorns in the country. And out of those 140 unicorns, only we have five female founders. So there you go. The numbers are not in our favor, but we have a great panel today. Some really amazing women who are working in this space, supporting women entrepreneurs. So without further ado, if I could get my panelists to talk about their background very briefly and also put a spotlight on how being an advocate for diversity has impacted them or their professional life. So, if I could just start with my panelists, maybe I can start with Neha.
Yeah, thank you, Neha. I guess I'm an investor, doctor by background, but then did a whole bunch of stuff in between, startup and then a venture capital fund, and now at an investment firm based out of Switzerland, investing in life sciences and health. And Yeah, I mean, I have so many comments to make, but that's just sort of a quick summary of my journey, and then hopefully look forward to answering the questions as we go on.
Thank you, Neha. Over to you, Claudia.
Hi, I am really happy to be here. I am a social entrepreneur. I've been working and being a social entrepreneur for I think that my entire life, particularly working for global systems, the United Nations, UNICEF, the UN Refugee Agency, the World Economic Forum, the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, you name it. Like pretty much same wine, different bottle, trying to provide social change by aggregating the efforts of many people to achieve ambitious goals. I moved to America 7 years ago, and I realized that I was part of the minority within the minority. I'm a Latina. And even though the numbers in America are massive of what this community gives, 19% of the population, where only 1% of VC funds or investment comes to Latinos. So I started working, set up a couple of foundations to advance Latinos, but also started working towards providing capital to Latinos. So I have Hispanic Star Ventures providing funds and also trying to advance Latinos by connecting them in networks so that we can advance the country as well.
Thank you. Wonderful. Mina?
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to join. It's a pleasure to join you all. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Fab. I'm a partner at McKinsey and Company, and I work on cutting edge technologies in my day job, but in my side job, and something that gives me great pleasure, I lead our efforts on recruiting, retaining, and advancing women in the US. Very happy to speak with you all. And in terms of investments, other than my own investments, I advise a lot of funds on their investment strategy and also finding diverse founders to invest in.
Wonderful. Last but not the least,
Hi, pleasure to be here. Hopefully you're able to hear me. I am wonderful. I'm a political economist by training. My work now, I run a small task force of really remarkable women focused on climate resilience, political, economic, and sociocultural strategy to drive climate resilience and carbon market futures called Galvanize Partners, and a public benefit corporation focused on synthetic biology and really radical science for living systems carbon sequestration. So my work is in the climate space broadly. And to the latter part of your question, I love to work with women for a variety of reasons. I find that to be a dynamic, empowering way to move forward in the complex, multidisciplinary fields we work in. But also I work in environmental justice. So a lot of the things that we invest in, the work that we drive forward, it is very possible to deliver inequitable outcomes for rural or disadvantaged communities if not done wisely and well. And so we look a lot at the future of carbon markets and environmental justice and equitable outcomes for diverse and underprivileged communities.
Super, thank you. So it looks like we have a very diverse panel bringing in the expertise from different walks of life. And while we were listening to the US ambassador, I realized that it's about walking the talk. And you're doing some amazing work, and I think your portfolio is very diverse in terms of the projects that you run. But if I were to ask you to pick just one project which has got just managed to bring a lot of impact to the society and the community, and if you can briefly touch upon how the project started and the kind of impact you have created, I think our audience would love to hear how your journey has been running one of those projects. So whoever is comfortable going next can unmute and share their journey.
I mean, I'm happy to start. As I said, I moved to America 7 years ago after 25 years of living in Europe. I am Mexican, Swiss, and when I moved, that was the first time in my life that I heard that I was a Hispanic. I lived my entire life as a happy Mexican. I never heard that term in my life. And I was like, what is this story? Who invented that word? And everyone here seems to be drinking the Kool-Aid and thinking that, yeah, Hispanics. I was like, what is that? And so what I realized being a marketer is that the data is gigantic for these Hispanics, but the reality is very small. And the numbers are big, but we ourselves, we think very small about ourselves. And so it was like a reverse marketing problem. So I was working for the Secretary General of the Executive Office, launching the Sustainable Development Goals. And I was like, we need something like that for Latinos so that we can have a master plan, so that we can advance, because pretty much Latinos are 12% of the GDP of this country, are $1.9 trillion in purchasing power. So there's no way that as a company, anyone can hire or sell without Latinos. There's no way a politician can win without Latinos, but we're invisible. So like the idea was actually taking the understanding that there were a number of really incredible individual efforts out there, but they were not joined in a collective platform or for generating systemic change. So what I started doing was understanding, trying to understand what were the issues, what were the outcomes that we wanted to bring, and what were the actions that we could bring that someone else was not bringing, and that what we could be doing. And so it was all about unification and aggregating. So right now, 3 years after, we're working with 280 companies of the Fortune 500. We work with 95% of all the Latino organizations that are working on, different issues. We have 30 Hispanic Star hubs all across the country, and a number of instruments that allow for a win-win-win for companies to become, a force for good and force for growth, but at the same time trying to inject opportunities, access, but also wealth to Latinos. So we have the Hispanic Promise, which is a corporate pledge to hire, promote, retain, and celebrate Latinos in the corporate environment, and that's really essential because there's a talent war in this country, and I suppose everywhere else in the world, of hiring Latinos. So companies need to understand how to make their environments inclusive and how to attract Latinos and others. We have a program like the Hispanic Promise Workforce Initiative, trying to get 1 million jobs, create 1 million jobs in the next 10 years for Latinos. We have a Hispanic Star Fund, which is, like a war chest, if you want, of bringing $1 billion in the next 10 years for Latino organizations so that, like whatever the need is, we just have to, like we have the data, if you want to understand who can implement those programs at the work level. And then, as I mentioned before, we have, like we have an arm that is ventures, that is investing in Latinos entrepreneurs. Action is a $20 million fund that ideally will grow very quickly to 100 million, acting as a friends and family. Because Latinos don't have the luxury of having friends and family that can give you the seed and pre-seed. So we're asking in that area, particularly looking at innovation that corporations can then afterwards absorb. So I think that my journey started by, like feeling invisible, feeling that my community, my daughter was not going to make the salary, was not going to get the investment, was not going to get the chance, only because she belonged to a group that was absolutely misunderstood, underrepresented, and absolutely undervalued. And so it was like looking at the data, understanding where we could play a role, and now really excited actually to see how, like in a way, the diversity and inclusion revolution is becoming what sustainability was 20 years ago, that if you don't have it, you're probably going to be out of business very soon.
Wonderful. So I'm sure in the near future, we're going to see a big change, women being visible and heard. Thanks for the work that you're doing. So Neha, can you talk about your pet project?
Yeah, sure. I mean, mine has definitely been a crossover between my professional work and the pet project. So I'm part of one of the I guess forum members or executive forum members for Health Investor Exchange as part of UNAIDS. And this was really to bring about equity in transfer of healthcare from what we've termed global north to global south. So a lot of technologies I focused on US and Europe, and we were seeing that there was huge access and equity to global south. So by that we mean, some parts of India, Indonesia, Africa, all these areas. And then within that, there's of course the gender disparity, which has just been there and has existed for a while. So we've brought together stakeholders from multiple backgrounds of investors, policymakers, heads of state, leaders in sort of healthcare institutions about how we can bring some of these technologies to answer the problems that are being faced by Global South, because actually the largest impact can be had there, even though the technology perhaps is created and developed in developed, if that's what you want to call them, countries. And so that's been huge, because we've had people from so many backgrounds, so many diverse ethnicities, gender, countries, socioeconomic status all come together. And actually the problems are the same, but it's just having a conversation about what is needed and how to get it. So for example, one of the companies it sort of does surgical training or training of surgeons remotely. So how can surgeons, say in Europe, train surgeons in Africa without really having to spend too much capital expense, and even perhaps just say whether surgery is even needed. And they've now deployed in sort of remote areas of Africa. And interestingly, the people that have benefited the most are the women, because they're often the ones that go last to see a doctor, right? They're like, I can cope, I need to take care of my child, I need to take care of the home. And they don't go to places. But actually, I'm sure you'll know that if, a woman takes care of her health, and usually other things flourish as a result. So just seeing just the impact of bringing people from diverse backgrounds, whether it be gender, ethnicity, country, whatever it is, talk about the problems they're having. I think we have found that the problems are very similar. We just need to share the access, and that's a big problem. I say it like it's an easy problem to solve, but it's a huge issue. And so I think just communication, access to innovation, access to technologies for us from an investment perspective, and getting them into places where we wouldn't otherwise think about, has been a huge impact for us.
Thank you. And I think you made some very relevant points, because I have myself seen when you try to use technology as a force of good, of course, there's a huge potential, but then you also have to look at affordability, accessibility, like you spoke about, and also creating awareness. So if there's no awareness, it's kind of very difficult to get the ball rolling. And I think, Teal, the kind of work that you're doing in the climate space is very interesting. And I was reading some report which goes on to say that women are left behind when we talk about climate dialogues. And we are yet to see a kind of a level playing field for women and youth, especially from the developing markets in the ASEAN region or South Asia. But I will wait to hear from you what you have to say as your views on this.
Thank you so much, Neha. And it's just fascinating to hear about the work of all of the other panelists as well. So thank you. Yes. Yes. I think climate in particular, for me, has felt like a place where women are sparse in the leadership roles for funds, for corporations, for the driving of technology advancements. I'll give kind of a specific example to your initial question, which actually relates to Indigenous communities. But on the women's leadership piece, and I imagine this may be similarly felt across all of us, I find that it certainly in the climate sector, but perhaps across the board, leading sort of big thinking ideas where you are really trying to change a system, women are more often asked what could go wrong, and men are more often asked what could go right. And so to be prepared in that moment for a real ability to lean in to the gender disparity and what it is that you think is needed in the space, in the system you're trying to change without just talking about what could go wrong, is just a learning that I think I've seen in the last few years as an aside. To answer the specific thing, in our recent work chairing a committee for the state of California focused on environmental justice in development of climate tech for wildfire mitigation, we discovered that some of the dirtiest energies, so to speak, are used in native corporations, native landscapes and governments, not because of any desire to be using diesel to power large facilities, but rather lack of access in rural regions to clean energy. And so a disproportionate and negative environmental outcome, which leads, of course, to health outcomes. So we really advocated for the opportunity to hold a commensurate group focused on equity and development and rural climate technology development that would deliver outcomes specifically for these more remote, less connected communities. And that, frankly, wasn't even a part of the initial plan. So at this point, it's interesting and exciting to see that the focus on equity and development for rural clean tech, for climate energy and climate technologies that specifically serve communities not in highly aggregated populations is increasingly becoming a piece of many people's story about what is possible and also what is critical. And that has led us to look specifically and work specifically with Indigenous corporations and governments in development of living systems carbon removal technologies, because the reality is they also have a propensity for looking at a very progressive climate future for their land. So not only are they kind of left out of the innovation pipeline, but in many cases, they are the most excited customer because they're experiencing the impacts disproportionately and more directly. And so it's an unfortunate gap that I think also is a pretty profound opportunity from an investment standpoint, which I share just to say that sometimes these gaps and disparities, as I think, Claudia, you mentioned as well, turn out to be some of the most significant opportunities. And when you can really see that potential and you have the ability to enter into that space with kind of some amount of grace and listening, it turns out that there's quite a bit of opportunity there financially and for the growth of the work we're doing as well.
Wonderful. So it looks like we have to see the problem as a potential chance to fix it, and then also see it as a low-hanging fruit. That's very cool. So at this stage, maybe I'll get Mina to share her views in terms of her pet project and the kind of impact it's creating in communities around in the US.
Absolutely. Well, first I'll just say it's really resonant to me, this idea that being sort of at the intersection of investing and technology, and also being diverse can be an opportunity. In advance of this, I looked into the investments our family office have done, and we are all obviously at the intersection of many things in my family. And one of the great opportunities we've had is that more than 80% of our founders are diverse. And I think we had access to those opportunities, because of some of the unfortunate dynamics that we see in the investing space. So, for those who are on the call and thinking about investing, it can be a real asset to be able to connect with and see through the bias that other founders have experienced when they come from diverse backgrounds. But in terms of my pet project, I'm so impressed with everything that everyone on this panel has achieved and is working on. For me, thinking about how I can drive more women into leadership positions in the US is my sort of personal cause. And McKinsey and Company, which is a very large strategy consulting firm, has often been sort of known as a sort of leadership factory. So a lot of Fortune 500 CEOs come through McKinsey. And so my experience has been, and my aspiration is to sort of, raise up the women around me. These statistics won't be a massive surprise to any of you, but the fact that only 14% of VC decision makers are women, the fact that 40% of high growth private companies didn't have a woman on the board in 2021, like a single woman of the probably 10 people. They couldn't find one woman to front. Those numbers to me are just incredibly disheartening. Even though they're improving over time, they're not improving fast enough. And so the project, Neha, that gives me the most energy day to day is finding just incredibly talented women, founders, consultants, CEOs, executives, and helping them to succeed. And to take up those seats on those boards, to take up those seats in those VC funds, to take up those seats as partners of McKinsey and Company. So a little bit more hand-to-hand combat that gives me passion in my day-to-day.
Wonderful. So you're creating the pipeline of talent. And I'm sure looking back, you would be very happy to see so many women taking up the leadership position. Excellent. So I think all of you are very accomplished. And now when you look back to your journey, I'm sure you would have some piece of advice to your younger self, or maybe to the budding entrepreneurs that are logged in right now. And we are talking about female entrepreneurs, or maybe there are people who would like to get into the VC space. So if you have any kind of advice to give to them, what would it be? Just about 2 pieces of advice?
I mean, again, I'm happy to jump in and look, I mean, like for me, I wish I would have had that aha moment earlier. I think that's it. My father was a civil engineer. And so he built highways, right? And so in Mexico, he would always take me because there was no GPS and the maps were paper. I don't know whether you remember that you had to fold them 20 times and so on. And so he always told me what a great co-pilot I was. Oh my God, you're so good. You're so good. I'm taking you next time to Acapulco, next time to Ixtapa. You're such a great co-pilot. And 5 years ago, when I started looking at, like how the reality for Latinos was really something personal, and I wanted to leave the comfort of being behind a massive organization like the United Nations or other, I just looked at my resume and I really saw that I was a right hand for someone my entire life without any intention. My father seeded on me the idea that I was a great co-pilot. And so I had great pilots, don't get me wrong. I am like blessed by the people that I work for. But what about I wanted to be a pilot of my own agenda, like a driver and an entrepreneur that could actually take my own life. So I think that, take my hand, like the driving force in my own hands. So I think that overall, I wish as a kid that I would have realized that there are voices, personal voices, family voices, social voices, cultural voices that all like influence you and tell you like, calladita te ves más bonita, don't shake the boat too much, stay in, be grateful you have a job, as opposed to failure is, like it's part of the success, go jump on it. So I think that I wish actually that I could have realized that it is not about being, it is not like realizing the voices earlier, having had that moment ahead of time that, like I could be the pilot of whatever I want to. And I think that many other people like me in the Latino community are pilots on their own. We just need to realize that we have to go in the right highways and support ourselves surround ourselves with people that are going to support us. And that pretty much, being able to not jump on it thinking that it is you have to be fearless. You just have to be fear-free, so that you can take the decisions of you want to be driving the cars that you want.
Excellent, Claudia. So I think that's a great piece of advice. Be in the driver's seat and put the blinders on. Well done. Okay, so who's going to go next?
I'll jump in. I mentioned earlier that I think this is true, and there's, I'm sure, data out there that women, I think, are often asked what could go wrong more than what could go right. And, hear that question. It is an important question. Chew on it, answer it, find the reasons about what could go wrong, but pivot back to what could go right. Because I think for me, I was always so challenged by the idea that you had to find like a specific topic, a specific thing that was going to drive you in your career and in your world. And I felt like a generalist. And so people would say, find your why, and it felt actually caging to me, because I thought, well, everything is my why. I have all of these things that I'm passionate about. There's all this change we want to create in the world. So I suppose, don't be caged in by that was something that was really meaningful to me, to say it's okay to be a generalist and to have your why be looking for what's possible, looking for solutions, being open, being curious, seeking growth, and, answer the tough questions, dot the I's, cross the T's, but pivot back to what's possible.
Wonderful. So be curious. And then I love what you said. And that reminds me of the quote, what if I fall, but what if you fly, right? So there's always a possibility that you can fall or you can fly. All right. So we go to Mina. Oh, Neha has unmuted herself.
No. Go. I'll go after Mina. Go.
I think for me, becoming aware of what your superpowers are has been incredibly powerful for me, and something I really encourage the women I work with to do. I think it's easy in moments where you're not feeling bold, you're not feeling like you're the pilot, as we've just heard, to really sort of question yourself and say, am I really valuable here? So a practice that I undertake and that I really encourage, especially entrepreneurs, to do, because there's a lot of rejection involved in being an entrepreneur, and in trying to break into VC, there's also a lot of rejection involved. And so I think to build your own confidence, your own reserve of sort of enthusiasm for yourself, to be your own number one champion, and to say, what are the things that will make me exceptional at this? And just to proactively remind yourself of those things, I think has been a sort of an important part of my journey, and advice that I generally give to the amazing young women who I work with.
Thank you, Mina. That resonates with me. It's about self-love and being your number one fan. Oh, wonderful. Over to you, Neha.
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree with everything that has been said on this panel. I guess for me, it breaks down into two, if I can. So one is the internal piece, which I think everybody has spoken about. Find your passion, remind yourself you do add value. What are your strengths or superpowers, as Mina said, and then really leverage that. Don't focus on your weaknesses. Everybody has weaknesses, whether you're a woman or a man or whatever, and acknowledge it. But that's it. Don't shine a spotlight on it. Focus on your strengths and go forward with confidence that is what you're going to bring to the table. But the second thing, perhaps a little bit more practical, is surround yourself by supporters, because unfortunately in this industry, or many industries, but look, I've come from medical to VC to investing, there are energy leeches, and don't have them in your life, and be very strong and aware about that, and then take them out and keep the supporters around you. So like, as Mina was saying, the way she supports some of the women around her, find yourself a good mentor / many role models. Talk to them out with what they've been through, because in your weakest moments, sometimes it's hard to bring yourself up. And if you have a strong person around you, it can really make the difference. So that's a little bit more of a very practical piece that I would say we should be doing more of.
Thank you, Neha. That's a great piece of advice. I could go on and on, because this has been a great learning experience for me, and I promise to stay in touch with all of you. And I wish I could ask more questions. I had so many questions to ask you, but I'm feeling bad that we are running out of time. But all the panelists right here are reachable on LinkedIn. So make sure that you ping them if you're planning to pivot your career from health to investment to climate energy to being a partner at McKinsey or trying to start your venture. And then also the Latino effect is there. So this panel has been fantastic. I feel so privileged to be doing this today right now. And I so look forward to staying in touch with you because I'm sure you could be my sounding board tomorrow. And there will be so many people listening to us right now who are learning from you right now and also would love to stay in touch. So that's all from me and my fellow panelists. Thank you so much for joining me. And it has been a great pleasure to be part of the Hoofs Future Summit.